Hello and a very warm welcome to our Conversations in Design session. I'm Claire German, Managing Director of the Design Centre. In this exciting virtual format, we're keeping our community engaged and inspired by bringing together designers, industry insiders and media hosts for some great conversations online. By the power of technology, this is a truly transatlantic session, and I'm delighted to introduce Robert Stilin, world-renowned interior designer, who is joining us from his home in New York. His interiors are simply sublime. And who better to speak to him than Pip McCormac, Editor-in-Chief of Livingetc. So over to you, Pip, and thank you all for tuning in. Thank you.
Robert, thank you so much for joining me. I'm such a fan of your work, as you know. What I really love about all the spaces that you create is they're so full of personality and character and charm and individuality. I mean, what is it you think are the most important elements when it comes to designing a sort of a wonderful, livable, characterful space?
I mean, I think the most important thing for me is comfort and a sense of realness and function, and just really creating, you're creating a lifestyle and you're creating a life in a home for a person or people. And I think, like, for me, that's the main focus, and everything kind of comes out of that. If it makes sense, it'll work. And I think that, like, you know, I was just speaking about this to someone else recently. I just, you know, naturally have this visceral filter of, you know, kind of like a checklist of how I look at things. And the older that I get, I feel like if I put those things through my filter, no matter what they are, they're all going to come out, and it's going to be attractive and stylish and chic and all that kind of stuff. But most importantly, so for the stylish aspect, you get that, but then there's the whole other function and the function part, and like really creating a life that makes sense. I mean, I'm not interested in creating interiors that you can't live in and that aren't comfortable. It doesn't make any sense to me.
So what's on that checklist of that you kind of put things through?
I mean, I think that part of it is just an instinctual thing, and of course I can describe it, but I think that, you know, when I'm just looking at something and kind of it's going through my mind in a judgment, its shape, its form, its color, its quality, its authenticity, its appropriateness, and then of course, what's its function? What's it going to do? Is it just a pretty thing? Is it a chair that you need to sit in? Is it a table that you're gonna, you know, keep your keys on? Like, what's it for, and how does it make sense in the context of what we're doing?
What are your kind of design starting points then? Like, do you start with the space? Do you start with the person you're designing for? Do you start with things in mind? Like, how does it all kind of begin?
Normally, when we're working on a new project with new clients, it starts with like some kind of a meet and greet, and that's just like let's get acquainted and see if we really like each other. It's kind of like dating, and you might go on a couple dates, and it's really good and helpful to, you know, I like people to come into the office and see kind of like what we do and how we work. And my offices are very residential feeling, so people get a good sense of, you know, you could live in my, you know, if we just had some bedrooms or whatever, you could kind of live in the offices. They feel that way. So that's good for the client to experience, and also to see, you know, to meet the team and who's going to be working there and how it functions and all that. That's good. And then likewise, it's also good to be able to go to the client's homes and see, even if they're going to completely create a new life for themselves, it's good to see how they live. And, you know, kind of like a little bit of everything, because they're, even though, you know, I'll ask them questions, but just everyone's life is a story, and it's like, what's their current story, and then what are their aspirations, or where do they want their life to go, and what's their new story. And so that kind of whole thing happens. And then if we agree that, like, we want to date, or we want to get married, or we want this mini marriage or whatever, then it's really about starting, like, very practically. We start with the architecture and the furniture plan and the function and the flow of whatever, you know, project we're working on.
And what I really love about your rooms is you're kind of, well, I don't know if this is fair, but in many ways you're kind of the anti-Marie Kondo. So you have stuff, but then also Marie Kondo had stuff too. Like, she gets a bad rep for saying get rid of all the clutter, because she likes to be surrounded by things that spark joy. And when I look at the pictures of your room, I feel quite joyful. There's stuff in them that just feels very treasured and loved. I wonder, how do you manage to kind of fill these rooms with furniture and objects and breathe life into the spaces, but stop them from feeling cluttered?
It's an editing process, and every client is different to the extent that they want layers. I mean, layers create what you're talking about. I can't remember now what you said her quote was, that she wants to live around things that are like meaningful and important to her, or whatever you said. I think that that's true for everybody, but everybody has their own threshold of like how much they want and how clean they and edited they want it to be, or how layered they want it to be. So that is really like, you know, subjective to the person. And then after that, it's an editing process. But one of the things that I do is that I create lifestyles for other people. So when every single thing that I'm selecting for a client, I, you know, go through this process of like, I choose what I can't, I'm a person that I can't recommend something that I don't like. I can't give a gift that I don't like, but I also don't want to give people the things that they don't like. So there's this interaction of like understanding what people like. And, you know, and then also editing it through my filters. And so every single thing that we do, I'm thinking about what's this like for the person. And like literally, I mean this, like every object that I buy, every book that I buy, whatever, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of like, of the client, not me. And so I think that attention to detail and thinking about who they are and what they aspire to be and all that, there's like a love and a passion from me that goes into that, that's relating to them, and it comes out in the interiors because it's thoughtful. There's a level of, I've done my research and I get to know the people and I establish relationships with them, and then I try to put them into the interior through the selection of everything that goes into it. And you know, you respond to that, so it must work.
Yeah, I mean, this space, this picture, which I chose from your vast body of pictures, just so happens to be the room you're in now, which I just think is a wonderful coincidence, is your own apartment in Soho in New York. Tell me a little bit about how these items all came to be placed together, because it's one thing just to say they're all things that you love, which I can wholeheartedly believe, but they do all have a wonderful relationship with each other, be it the heights of things that work together, there's a colour that's through, you know, is it just a happy coincidence they came together as things you love, or did you put them together?
Well, I've lived in my apartment for 11 years now, and I didn't kind of in the beginning do that many things that were sort of customizable for my apartment, in the sense that I really like, you know, I happen to be, in addition to being a designer, I've been kind of like a dealer, gallerist, whatever you want to call it, my entire career. And, you know, I have owned and sold and had some kind of platform to offer, you know, vintage and antique furniture and objet and all that kind of stuff. And so I have a lot of stuff. And so I didn't need to go out and buy things necessarily. I went into my own inventory and I selected things to put into my apartment. So there was the immediate round in the beginning of like, okay, you know, let's just get this apartment off the ground and let's get it going, and like, let's just be functional. And then over the course of, you know, the past 11 years, it's evolved, and, you know, I've, you know, collected most things that are in the apartment that weren't here from the beginning. You know, I've collected art and objects and books and furniture. And, you know, I started with a kind of like a foundation, and then some things I've been here the whole time, and other things I pick and choose and I edit them. But like, if I was doing this room right now from scratch, it would be like, you know, the sofa is the foundation kind of the room. That's the core. And then you sort of build out from that. And, you know, there's a level of just like, it's just methodical and makes sense. Like, how do you want to live in this room? Like, you want to have a nice grouping where you can have people. You want to be able to feel comfortable to be in this room by yourself and make it cozy, and, you know, or have a friend and have a conversation or different conversations and all that. So I'm thinking about all those things. And then of course I want it to be attractive, and I want to live around things that I like and enjoy and make me happy. And all those things go into like the process of just kind of like, you know, putting it all together and then editing it. And, you know, and 30 years of experience of just doing all that kind of stuff, I have like, you know, this just For me, I have to say it's an innate thing because I didn't go to school. I didn't study design. I didn't do any of that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't have that background. I have a completely self-taught thing. So, it's just a lot of experience, I guess, more than anything. And then taking to try things out. And if they don't work, you change them.
Yeah, as soon as you said that, I instantly saw the ability of that room to aid conversation. So the way that the seats are positioned and also just the shape of them, I just instantly, I could imagine like groups of people just sat around leaning into each other talking, and that, yeah, I can see how that is the intention of the room and how that comes across. The title for this talk is The Space Between, and I suggested that because what I love about your work is, although there's loads of things in the room, it's weirdly the space between the items that I'm drawn to. I've heard you say before in another interview that there's no need to match, your light shades to your artwork, and that actually lighting is the most important thing in bringing a room together. I mean, there's nothing more the space between than the light.
Right.
What do you mean by that, and how do you get the lighting right?
Well, I like soft lighting, which is a constant battle with my clients because they don't oftentimes understand it from the same perspective that I do, and they want things to be brighter. So we tend to create lighting plans for homes that have the ability to get very bright, but also can get very dimmed down. And I think it just depends on the time of the day and the use and all that kind of stuff. But for me personally, I prefer dim light all the time. I like it better. It's just more restful and relaxing. And the amount of times that I spend at home, I'm in that space where I feel like either it's, the middle of the day and you don't even necessarily need that much extra light, or oftentimes it's at night and and I'm not looking to like brighten up my life. I'm looking more to like chill down and like be kind of restful. So I like moody lighting. That's just, and I'd like that across the board sort of for everyone. But of course we have to embrace and adapt to our clients, and clients like it too, but they want the ability to like turn the room up to 100% and like have it so bright, be it for cleaning or, whatever their reasons are. So that's always a dance, but like, it's really like lots of dimmers.
Yeah. So you would, I'm assuming then that you would never use spotlights if you could avoid it. You wouldn't.
I don't like, I feel like your home is your home. And, I'm an art collector and I work with a lot of art collectors. And I feel like if you want to have an art collection that's displayed like it's in a museum or a gallery, open a museum or a gallery. Your home is your home, and you should live with things, and they don't need to be spotlighted. I'm not interested in I could be convinced. I mean, if I had a client who's the real show people and they want to show stuff out and they want to have big dinner parties and fancy things and all that, and they want to have a very formal house, even if it's low key and casual, but have this formality of showmanship to it, I would do it, and I can do it. And then I might light art and I might light objects and all that kind of stuff. But generally, most of my clients are, no matter how sophisticated they're like chill people who have kind of crazy lives. They usually have children and dogs and all this kind of stuff. They're not looking for their house they want their houses to be beautiful, but more on the serene, chill, cool vibe with interesting things and all that. They're not looking to make any particular thing stand out. It's like they just want it to be nice. And I like that. That's what I like. It's my own personal thing. I could adapt to any client, whatever they wanted, but I feel like that's how you want to be at home.
What's interesting about all the things you just said is when you're talking about chill spaces, family, dogs, real life happening. If I was to conjure up a room that kind of had that vibe in my mind, white walls would not be the first go-to that I would choose. However, they feature so heavily in your work, and they weirdly, I don't know how you do it, some kind of alchemy or magic, they never seem to look stark. Like, first of all, why is it white that you're so drawn to in so many of your rooms?
I mean, there's true confessions in it. I mean, to this day, I've been doing this work for 30-ish years, and color is the biggest challenge in terms of like, I have the highest level of insecurity around color, not color in terms of like materials, but color in terms of like really making a choice to paint a room like, you know, orange or green or that kind of thing, and being really bold about it, and picking paint colors, because you have to pick a paint color and you sample them, and they never look the same as the chip, and then the light changes and all this. There's so many variables that you can't control that at a point it's a leap of faith. And so there's a riskiness to it. So when I was younger, I was afraid of that, and I kind of like would avoid it. And I always said, like, you know, I'm going to bring the color in from the materials and the fabrics, and bring the outside in and the art and all that. And I do, and like, and you can do that so effectively. And you know, if you look at my book, you're right. There's a lot of like white backgrounds, and the art and everything in it like adds all these layers, and that just serves as like the white becomes part of the architecture, and it's a background to build on. So I still feel 100% that that's true. I like that. But what I've found, you know, maybe in the past few years of my life, working with different people, and you know, I've had clients who come like, you know, like, we love our house in the Hamptons, it's a beach house, and it's, you know, it's all white and whatever, and it's great, and we like the layers, whatever, but like, this is our apartment in the city. We want glamour, we want color, we want this or whatever. And I'm like, okay, I got to figure it out. So, so that being pushed by clients, but then also just my evolution as a person, I found myself more relaxed with it, more confident, and I'm more open to it. And a room that 5 or 10 years ago I would have automatically painted, you know, super white or something, I might drop a little bit of lavender in that color, or I might drop a little bit of like seafoam green or an icy blue or whatever. And we're doing that a lot more now than we used to. And it's kind of consistent with what, you know, my naturally evolving philosophy of design, in that it's another layer, and it's an interest. And I feel like what I before I was referencing that, I was having a conversation. I do these Instagram stories. I don't know if you ever see when I do them, and I save pictures over like a day or two that I like, usually from other people's Instagram, and they're in my saved thing. And then I go through and I curate like anywhere from 15 to 25 or 30 pictures, and I do a story for 24 hours, and every day or two I do that again. And someone was asking me how I do that and how do I organize it, whatever. It's a visceral kind of thing, but what I find with it, and it's kind of it's a great exercise, because I push myself to choose things that people might not expect me to do, or that, but I like them, and I want to go there and try it. And it always kind of, and if you take it through this filter of like, you know, does it have great, you know, is it good quality? Is it authentic? Does it have a good message? Is it beautiful? Is it aesthetic? Does it have good form and shape? Is it a quality picture? Is it relevant? And all this kind of stuff. And it passes all those tests. It just kind of works. And it works with another thing. And then the other thing reacts to that. And they create this story and dance. And I think it's the same in interiors. And I think the work just gets deeper and richer as you move along, and you get more, you know, accomplished and confident about what you do, and take chances and realize, you know, that you can just do more things. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting like way too like philosophical with you. I don't know, but like that's where I kind of am in you know, myself as a person, in terms of like in relating it to my design. I don't fear of color that I used to have, but it started kind of with the fear of color. That's the truth.
It's so clear to me that so much of what you do comes from within, and it is about your instincts and just following what you love. I think it's very interesting that your foray into the world of color is things like lavender and ice blue that are still very like on that white spectrum, just with like little hints. And so I think it's still very you. When you are using a white wall or a lavender wall or something like that, what considerations do you put into which tone or which pigment to choose for that room?
Again, I think it depends on the client, the project, the site, the lighting, you know, what is this room going to be used for? Is it a bedroom? Is it a living room? Is it a library? Like all those kind of, you know, details kind of have part of it. And what's the overall sort of like palette and taste of the client, and what's their appetite for color? And, you know, it's more those kinds of things. And then when you answer all those questions, then it's kind of like, okay, like, well, what colors would be right? And, you know, X client likes, you know, lavender and green and blue, and another client, you know, likes, you know, deeper colors that are richer and more jewel tone-ish or whatever. And then I would sort of go to those things.
Do you have any particular paints that you use as your go-tos? Do you have any brands that you particularly like?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in the United States, we use Benjamin Moore like the most. We also love Farrow and Ball. We do Fine Paints of Europe, Pratt and Lambert. I'm not really good with the names. There's a lot of different names. My office knows. But
do you prefer to see these things in person? I'm sure as the world is opening up again, it must make things a bit easier for you now to be able to.
Yeah, I mean, I have to sample. And especially if it's going to be bold, I want to sample it and see it and try it on site. If not, I'm going to, if I can't do that, then I would err on the conservative side and I would like not go overboard with the color. But we just did a project out in the Hamptons for a client who really likes color, and we painted all the interior doors are like a fairly deep lavender. And actually, no, all the doors in the house are a dark blue. It's a camp house, and like literally like a camp, like a rustic camp that's been modernized. And so the main part of the house, the doors, the interior doors are dark, like a dark steely blue. But in the master suite, we did all the doors in this really beautiful kind of like medium lavender. And, it was bold, but the client liked it and wanted it. And then her walls are largely like they appear white, but they're all colors. They're the slightest amount of lavender, the slightest amount of pink, the slightest amount of blue, the slightest amount of green, a little bit of gray. And but it's all tonal in the sense that like the whole house relates. And if you stood back, it gives kind of like a whitish impression or just like a tonal impression, but there's color. And then in terms of like the fabrics and art and all that, there's like that much more color that's like sort of like layered over it.
Would if you had done, so say one of the rooms that you've got kind of the lavender tones on the wall, are there lavender tones then picked up in the art and the furniture, or is that not something that you don't go down that line?
Well, I would never do that on purpose, but sometimes by accident, and it could be yes or no. Like I have no strict rules about that. I wouldn't not use lavender because the walls are lavender, and I wouldn't use lavender because the walls are lavender. It's more like, where are we going with this and what looks good, and like, taking in all the sort of like, elements of what's going to go in this room, including like the function and the use and all that, but also the client and the taste and all this kind of stuff. Or, it's like, or that particular client, it's like, it's a husband and wife, and like, she likes pretty and she's very glamorous and all that kind of stuff. And her husband is like, an athlete and, like a businessman and all that. And a little bit, he's very open and he's super indulgent to his wife and he loves her, but all that, but like, he'll only go so far with like, I don't know if I can sleep in a pink bed or whatever, but like, so there's all those things that you have to balance out when you're at the table or on the side or whatever, kind of like putting these things and making decisions. But like, we create a story and then we show it to the client and they like it or they don't like it and we adjust it or whatever. Most times they like it though.
I've also heard you say in previous interviews that that scale and size is also super important, and that large pieces are very key to what you do. And I see that in your work. You quite frequently have a very large piece of art. In this image, for example, the art is quite large and dominating and wonderful. What is it about that sense of impact that draws you?
I mean, larger pieces of art and larger pieces, it makes everything bigger and it sort of opens things up and creates a sense of expansion and depth to a room that it wouldn't otherwise have if you keep everything on the tiny side. Especially like if you have small spaces, people think small space, small furniture. No, like put the biggest furniture that you can fit in there and it'll make the whole thing feel bigger. But it's also true of normal spaces. Like scale just it makes the space have a flow and an essence to it that just feels more substantial than tiny.
I really like just behind your shoulder, the way you have like the huge art and then the smaller pieces sort of next to them, which kind of work almost to enhance what's in the middle. They're like petals to the center of a flower, right? In some ways.
Exactly.
See the bigger version here. How do you think about framing for art? Because that's something that people often get themselves tied up in knots when it comes to, and how do you choose what to use?
I like very clean, crisp framing. I typically like things to be, you know, on the modern side. Like even if it even like I love to take like a Picasso and put it in a modern frame, not like a beautifully, you know, they'll come in a gilded carved frame, and I prefer that. I do like a crispness of it, but it goes back to the same thing. It's like I literally frame every single piece based on that piece. And I have, you know, my framer is in Long Island City. I have my main frame. I've been working with them for like 25 or 30 years. We send the art there. Sometimes I go in person, but most of the time, even before COVID, they take pictures of everything. They make suggestions. I say, I like this, I like that, don't do this, don't do that. What about this? What about that? It's a whole process for every single piece of art that we frame. So there's no like, is there a thread? Yes, of course. I mean, I tend to like either, you know, white frames or like beautiful wooden frames that have a medium to darker stain on them, it's very dry. I like super high quality frames. When you start getting into like more molded frames, I really like frames that don't have seams and they don't crack. And I have a million fussy little things that I care about. I typically don't like matting unless it's absolutely essential. I like to float things and see the natural edges. You know, if you're putting like a painting in a shadow box, I want to see the edge of the painting where the painting go, you know, the paint dripped on the sides, all that kind of stuff. So I have a lot of details like that, but again, it's all subjective to the project and the client.
I think it's really interesting as well, your placement of things actually on the wall too. Do you I don't know, like sometimes I've read about tricks to hanging art is that people will measure it all out on the, like, place things on the floor before they place things up, or are you a bit more instinctive than that? Do you just kind of?
It's a combination, like, you know, no, if you're doing like I'm looking at that wall behind the dining table that you showed the first image, and, you know, I have two large Wade Guyton pieces, and then I have all these salon style ones. I mean, you can't do that without a plan. I mean, you can a little bit, but if you do, unless you just happen to be like a beyond superstar salon style hanger, if you do that thing with, I think there's like total on the wall 20 pieces, you're definitely going to have a few moments where you're going to have to take something off and take the nails out and redo it and move it around and all that, because it's a puzzle. Like, you have to put this puzzle, you know, together and make it all work. And we all have this like aversion to putting too many holes in the walls, even though in the end it doesn't really matter that much because you can patch them and most of them end up getting covered anyway. But so I think, you know, there's a certain amount of planning. Yeah, you have to plan a little bit, but it's a puzzle.
What I love about that last image, Robert, is there's the space between, again, in that image, you have shown remarkable restraint to leave one side completely art-free. Whereas I think if I had, you know, hung all the art that you had on the left-hand side, I'd be like, quick, let's do the right too. And I think you're so good at leaving the light, you know, having the light and the shade and the contrast. And that, I think, is what brings your work together.
That over time, I probably will end up putting something in that space too, because I'll just have something else. But yeah, no, you can. And you know, there's the thing that's kind of, I think, is actually fun, and this could cause stress and anxiety to a lot of people, is that there's so many different ways to do stuff. You know, you could take a fairly big wall and put a very small painting on it that you would not really imagine. And I'm completely contradicting myself in terms of scale. That is so incredibly stunning if it's just the right piece of work that has like something about it that just is so large, even though it's small, that it kind of it does this thing on the wall that like just brings you in, and just, you know, it's like it's more minimal, and it just works with all the dynamics of the room or whatever. That can be stunning. I do that a lot less than I do like more, but, you know, it just depends on the circumstance.
Great. Yeah. Robert, thank you so much for your time. It was fascinating to hear the story behind the pictures.
Wait, we're done?
Yeah, we're done. I mean, I feel so familiar with that work. I feel like I've pored over those images. It's so great to hear you talk about how they came together. I'm such a fan, as I said at the top. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, Robert.
Okay, so much. I really enjoyed it.
Have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.